So, so I'm making this mainly as a response to Josh Pate. We talk about the playoff and we talk about bowl games and the trend of bowl games becoming meaningless and regular season games being devalued. And we attribute this to the playoff. We attribute this to the playoffs expanded. More teams can get in, so there's a little less meaning in the regular season around 1 or 2 games a year, right? You'll have 1 or 2 games a year that would affect what a national championship would be in a BCS system. And I can't agree with that. Yes, you might have a little less value on big time games, right? So we've got Georgia, Alabama tomorrow. Does that game mean any less than it would have in 2012? Does the Iron Bowl mean any less than it would have in 2012? No. The answer to those questions is no. Those games still have meaning. They have meaning beyond college football playoff implications. They had meaning beyond BCS title implications. They had meaning beyond that, right? Because when you have these fan bases and they hate each other, it's not about winning the game to advance further to get a better shot at the college football playoff or the BCS title. It's about just beating the other team. And so these regular season games, these big time matchups, they're not any less meaningless because both teams might make the college football playoff. They don't mean anything less because neither team is eliminated from national championship contention. You want to talk about teams being eliminated from national championship contention. Under the BCS system, we would kick off the week 0 and there'd be maybe 15, 20 teams that could make it to the national championship. So if it's a problem that at the beginning of the season, every team can have a realistic path to playing for a national championship, playing in the playoff, I mean, is that really an issue? Is that teams actually have a legitimate chance to go play the game? And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the G5 champion is going to be competitive every year in the college football playoff and make these Cinderella runs to the national championship game year after year, because that's not going to happen. More often than not, they're going to lose big time on the road at whatever the number 1 team is that didn't win their conference championship. That's what's going to happen 99% of the time. But the game needs to be played. All right, for some reason, there's this mystique around college football that championships should be decided in a hotel conference room, right? We should get together in a hotel conference room and we should pick which team we think is the best, and that should be who the national champion is. And we've gotten away from that, which is a good thing, to where if you go undefeated and if you win your conference championship, you will have a chance to win a national title. Now, you might not be good enough, right? You might not have the Jimmies and Joes to get it done on the field, but you have a chance. You have a game where you can go out there and say, you know what? We actually are competing for it. We actually are playing this game for the national championship or for the playoffs, however you want to say it. If that's a problem, then lock me up and throw away the key. Because the system where you can kick the season off and before the season starts, you can already eliminate 90% of teams from national championship contention just doesn't work. It's not equitable. It's not a system that we can have. And that system itself devalues the national championship. It devalues the national championship game. Because when you have, let's look at the 2012 BCS national championship game. It was a rematch of a game already played earlier in the year between two teams in the same conference. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Why do we need to see the same game twice? Oklahoma State could have made it that year, but they didn't, because some people got together in a hotel conference room and decided they weren't good enough. If it's a problem for the national champion to be decided on the field as opposed to off the field, lock me up, because that's not a system I want for college football. That's not a system that keeps me interested throughout the year, knowing, hey, if my team goes 12-0 this year, we only have a 10% chance to play for a national title. We need X, Y, and Z to lose for us to even have a chance. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You can't have a system like that. If you want to say these other teams, they aren't going to win the games, these G5 teams aren't going to win the games, that's all fine and dandy. You're probably right. They're not going to win that many games, but you have to beat them on the field. You have to beat them on the field. All right? You can't just say, oh, we think they're going to lose, so throw them out, get them out of here. Doesn't matter. No other sport on the planet can you go undefeated and not have a chance to win the title. So I'm not extremely happy with the landscape of college football, but to act like the playoff in itself is a bad thing is silly. All right. Most of people's issues with the current landscape of college football shouldn't be the playoff. It should be conference realignment, right? It should be going from regional conferences with regional rivalries to these big national conferences that go coast to coast and have these games that don't have any history behind them. So, and another point I'd like to address, I was watching Josh Pate's show. I'm a big fan of Pate State, and he brought up that 5 of the top 8 teams in the AP poll are in the SEC, and made a comment about, can you feel the parity brought by the 12-team playoff? Well, all I have to say about that is if we had a 4-team playoff this year, then would 5 of the top 8 teams in the AP Bowl suddenly not be SEC teams? Right? If we had a BCS system this year, would that affect how good each team was? I mean, no, right? Even if we had a BCS system, we'd probably be looking at a SEC BCS championship unless Ohio State goes undefeated. So the 12-team playoff in and of itself is not a bad thing. You get home playoff games, you get access to the playoff that teams previously didn't have. And look, you're right. There's going to be a lot of SEC teams in it. There's going to be a lot of Big Ten teams in it. But you're going to have teams that didn't have access before have access now. And that is the biggest positive of the college football playoff, is that these teams that didn't have a chance, they couldn't have made a championship game in 50 years if they went undefeated every single year. They have a chance now. So in my book, that's a positive, right? There's other issues with college football, but the college football playoff is not one of those issues. Now that we've got that out of the way, I've got 2 teams that I think are the biggest frauds this year. First off, Missouri. If you go back to last year, Missouri beat Middle Tennessee State by 1 score. Missouri beat Memphis by 1 score. And then you come into this year, they barely squeaked by Vandy in double overtime, I believe it was. And look, Boston College is not that good. They beat a bad Florida State team, and they got overrated based off that and got into the AP top 25 based off that. They're not a top 25 team. They're going to be a middle of the pack ACC team, and they took Missouri at Missouri down to the wire. With that being said, I can almost guarantee Missouri's going to make the college football playoff, because while they are a decent team, they're not elite. They play the weakest schedule in the SEC. The only top tier team they play is Alabama. You play Alabama, and then your next best games are Texas A&M and Oklahoma. Well, Oklahoma just lost to Tennessee, and Texas A&M already lost to Notre Dame. So we're looking at this. Your number 2 and number 3 best games of the year are 2 middle of the pack SEC teams, and you can say a middle of the pack SEC team would be elite in another conference. I personally don't think Oklahoma and Texas A&M are elite teams, so they're going to go, 11-1 or 10-2 and end up in the top 8. They're probably going to get a home playoff game, which it is what it is, but they are not a top tier team. When they play a top tier team, they will get blown out. They're going to lose to Alabama by probably 14-21, would be my guess. And once they actually have to play another top team when they make it to the playoff based off this easy schedule, they're going to get blown out again. Second, UCF. There's some hype around UCF now. What have they done to deserve the hype? You beat a TCU team by 1. Other than that, you beat New Hampshire and Sam Houston State. What the hell are we doing here? I mean, UCF could be good. They could be good. But I'm not sold on them yet. That's beating TCU by 1 does not warrant the hype they're getting right now. I just don't see it, to be honest with you. I don't see the hype around UCF. They've vaulted in computer polls, in the JP poll, and the Saragin ratings. I don't see it. I'm pumping the brakes. I'm saying, we need to actually see them play a decent team. TCU got blown out by SMU. So let's pump the brakes. Let's see how they do against Colorado this week, and we'll go from there. Now to wrap it up, I've got 5 picks for you. Now, these aren't picks that I'm guaranteeing are going to hit. They're not locks of the week. They're not, but these are picks where I think the money is statistically there, right? So what I mean by that is if a team is plus 100, they have a 50% chance of winning. I would pick them if I think they had a 65% chance of winning. So Colorado over UCF. I think Colorado is going to surprise some people in this game. I don't think UCF is what people are saying they are right now, and I think people have let their hatred of Colorado and Dion kind of get to their head a little bit on how bad this Colorado team is. I don't think they're that bad. I mean, in the second half of that Nebraska game, they didn't play that bad. And they've looked decent in other games. I mean, so they're a 14-point dog. They're plus 14 right now. I'm picking a money line over UCF. Cincinnati over Texas Tech. This game's at Texas Tech. I just don't believe in Texas Tech. Cincinnati lost a close one to Pittsburgh. Other than that, they've got the job done. So I'm going Cincy over Texas Tech. Washington over Rutgers. I'm not sold on Rutgers either. They beat a Virginia Tech team in just a sloppy game. You had turnovers at the goal line. Virginia Tech had a muffed punt. It was just a sloppy game all around. So I don't think they're going to beat Washington. I think that run's going to end there. Maryland over Indiana. Indiana's another team that I kind of think is fraudulent. They haven't played anybody. Their best game is UCLA, who's horrible, but they beat them by a lot, right? So I try to not take too much information from beating a bad team by a lot, because sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you play a bad team, and even though you're not a world beater, even though you're not an elite team, you hang 70 on them, right? James Madison hung 70 on UNC. Do I think if they played that game again that James Madison would be favored to win that game? Honestly, no. I don't think they'd be favored to win that game. But just because you can beat bad teams by a lot, crazy stuff happens in college football, right? I'm not buying the hype on IU either. And then to wrap it up, UNC over Duke. That's all I have to say about that one. I don't believe in Duke. They're a basketball school. They can stick to basketball. Not a big UNC fan either, but I think they'll rebound from that James Madison game, and I think they'll get it done this week. So, thanks for watching.